Hello, I'm Andrew from Limitless Park, and I hate originality. Nothing is enjoyable unless it's a sequel to something that has already existed. I mean, why do something new when you could do something you've already done but make it newer, bigger, better, hell, even worse? Movies, video games, books, all sorts of things get sequels. I mean, I got rid of my old toaster as soon as I heard Toaster 2 dropped. But what about roller coasters? Do those get sequels? Well, me, thanks for asking. No problem. I didn't ask you. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, they most definitely do. Now, I can't talk about every roller coaster that's gotten a sequel. I mean, what can I possibly say about something as dumb as Cascabel 2.0 in Mexico City? Oh wait, it's actually got a very interesting history that includes it currently sitting in shambles and storage at Indiana Beach, which is the theme park equivalent of Athlete's Foot. Oh yeah, that's really fun. But it has nothing to do with being a sequel, so it doesn't matter. But real quick, what qualifies as a sequel coaster? Well, to me it's just a coaster that has either been revamped as a sort of replacement to a previous ride, perhaps keeping most of the name with its own unique spin, or it's a straight up new roller coaster that references the previous coaster it's either replacing or iterating upon. The sequel coaster doesn't necessarily have to have the word 2 in it. This isn't Daddy's Home 2 after all, but it sure does make it more fun. And to show y'all how fun a roller coaster name plus a 2 can be, we're gonna first talk about everybody's favorite punching bag trash can combination, Top Thrill 2. Whoa! I didn't know you could vomit disappointment! I don't think I can say anything that hasn't already been said here, but I'll try. Collywobble! So, Top Thrill Dragster. It was the tallest roller coaster in the world when it opened in 2003, as well as the first strata coaster. That's Virgin code for over 400 feet. It was actually 420 feet tall and kept that record for a whopping 2 years before Six Flags Great Adventure came in and beat it with King Ka. So Dragster sat as the second tallest in the world until 2021 when, unfortunately, a serious incident led to Cedar Point announcing that the ride would be retired in its original form. This was obviously sad news for multiple reasons, but the park did announce that they were working with Zamperla to reimagine Top Thrill Dragster into something different. Oh, hell yeah! Zamperla has made all sorts of good roller coasters. Things like Back at the Barnyard Hayride, the Tickler, Tiny Toot. Oh, not again. I accidentally replaced the words no with yeah and bad with good. Yeah, Zamperla was a questionable manufacturer to partner with since they're not exactly known for their extreme rides, and Top Thrill Dragster is a one-way ticket to Adrenaline Avenue. But whatever, Cedar Point has to know what they're doing, right? I mean, they showed off a POV of what the reimagined ride would look like. They started building a pretty awesome looking vertical spike. The new color scheme looked fantastic, the trains looked so sick, and the name, well, now we know that dragsters are out and twos are in. Then they topped off the track in December of 2023. Testing started in 2024, and then a soft opening was held on April 25th of 2024. Top Thrill 2 was looking pretty good. Until it wasn't. The revamped ride officially opened to the public on May 4th, 2024. There was quite a bit of scattered downtime here and there, but those who rode it seemed to love it. They said it was a fresh take on the ride, and even if the launch wasn't as snappy, the backwards section changed up the experience enough and the top hat was still as thrilling as ever. It seemed like the ride might still be a hit, but then that scattered downtime just became normal extended downtime. Like hours and days of downtime. And on May 12th, literally 8 days after it opened, Cedar Point announced that Top Thrill 2 would experience an extended closure to modify the trains due to an unspecified issue. People thought, okay, maybe it'll open in June, or July, or August. It didn't. In fact, despite some random testing every once in a while, Cedar Point announced on August 23rd that Top Thrill 2 wouldn't open for the remainder of the season, and they'd continue to work on it with the goal of opening it in 2025. And then during the production of this episode, Cedar Point decided to randomly announce Siren's Curse, a brand new tilt coaster coming to the park in 2025. That might sound super cool at first, but to me it kinda makes it seem like Top Thrill 2 might be even more unreliable for the coming season than we thought if they need a whole additional roller coaster to share the limelight with it. At this rate, I'd say there's actually a chance that the entire ride gets scrapped. It might be a very small chance, but it's still a chance, and that is crazy. So that blew. Top Thrill 2 is an absolute mess. As a sequel coaster, it might be pretty good if it were open, but it's not, so it isn't. I mean, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back wouldn't be a good sequel if it never came out, right? And if you never seen Star Wars, just replace that with any sequel movie that came out and it'll make sense. Like, I don't know, Happy Feet 2? Actually, that's worse for coming out. But if you think Top Thrill 2 is as bad as it gets, no way, Jose. It can always get worse. Next up, let's talk about Kings Island's Son of a Bitch. Oops, I messed that name up. Or did I? I think you messed up that name. No, I didn't. Son of Beast. Those 3 words can send chills down a coaster enthusiast's spine. And if they visited Kings Island from 2000 to 2009, they could also potentially break their spine. Kings Island already had a record-breaking wooden coaster with the Beast, which opened in 1979 as the longest, tallest, and fastest in the world. But in the late 90s, the park decided having offspring was really in and started working with the now-defunct Roller Coaster Corporation of America to build Son of Beast. Revealed at a public event on May 11th, 1999, the new ride would be the first wooden coaster over 200 feet, the first wooden coaster with an actual loop, and it would break a whole host of other records, including all those previously held by the original Beast. It was shaping up to be a worthy successor, the sequel coaster of all time. And then the nightmares began. Son of Beast had tons of problems during construction. RCCA was fired before it was completed, part of the ride was heavily damaged by wind, the second hill collapsed, the ride was delayed a couple times, and the park was fined $110,000 for 18 safety violations. But somehow they still managed to hold previews starting April 28th, 2000. I should have mentioned that most of those issues started in January of 2000, meaning they managed to push through all of that and get it open in 4 months. I still don't know if that was incredibly impressive or incredibly stupid. Actually, I do. It was incredibly stupid. What the hell were they thinking? Don't believe me? Literally only days after previews, the park found defects in some of the track and closed it for 3 weeks of repairs. Then it officially opened on May 26, 2000, but throughout the opening year, more changes would have to be made. Flash forward to 2006, and Son of Beast is still operating, but has a major structural track failure that jolted riders. And even though the incident was non-fatal, it was obviously still a big enough problem for the park to close the ride for the remainder of the season. Instead of closing it forever though, Kings Island actually just got Son of Beast new trains that were much lighter and shorter, which would supposedly reduce the overall weight on the structure. This might seem like the perfect solution until you realize, hey, if the lighter and shorter trains weigh less than the previous trains, how could they complete the entire ride circuit if it was designed for heavier trains? And that, my friends, is the next issue in the long line of Son of Beast screw-ups. I hope you grabbed your ticket, cause you're gonna be waiting a while. I'm number 237. In 2007, in order to help the shorter trains complete the circuit, Kings Island removed perhaps the coolest, most unique part of the ride, the loop. They said it was to make the ride more comfortable, and technically they weren't lying, but we all know it was because those new trains just couldn't get it up and needed some help. But whatever, the coaster still held the tallest and fastest wooden coaster record at least. It would continue to operate until 2009 when another major incident would happen. Now you may notice that up until now I haven't really been talking much about the ride experience itself. I can't really comment on it personally as I didn't ride it. Son of Beast wasn't the only Satan spawn born in May 2000, and by the time it closed in 2009 I probably still would have pissed my pants at the sight of a coaster that tall. But we can go off of what others said, and the reception was generally horribly negative. This coaster was, pardon my French, rough. So many people were complaining of their backs and necks hurting after riding and being jolted all over the place. The loop was a huge issue, so removing it helped a bit, but the profiling on the track was just terrible. All of that came to a head in 2009 when a rider reported a non-contact head injury. Kings Island closed the ride and didn't open it for the rest of the season. Despite hearing multiple proposals for fixing it, the park opted to just let the coaster sit and rot. Signage was removed, the ride disappeared from park maps, and there was no mention of it on the park's website. It was all but dead, but somehow it still managed to stay standing but not operating until 2012 when it was finally removed. Son of Beast was, by all means, a spectacular failure for the park. But hey, at least we got Banshee out of it, so that's pretty cool. I actually don't care for Banshee too much. I think the inversions are too drawn out and boring, but don't tell Banshee, okay? And besides, there's a Son of Beast reference in the queue. It's a super obvious reference, with the Son of Beast logo in the years 2000 to 2009 noting just how long guests were allowed to, suffer. But it's still there, and that's pretty cool. So, we're 0 for 2 with sequel coasters. This is not going well, and we need an easy win. I'm thinking a coaster that's beloved by everyone and in no way, shape, or form bankrupt aerodynamics in its original form before it became a sequel coaster. You know, I feel like I don't ask for much, but I guess I do. In early 2002, Six Flags Magic Mountain opened X to the general public. It was a fourth dimension coaster that would rotate riders on each car in addition to sending them through all sorts of wacky elements. This ride was awesome. And expensive. So expensive that it ended up bankrupting Aerodynamics, arguably the most famous roller coaster manufacturer of all time. Was it worth it? Well, the coaster eventually received onboard audio.
It had to be you. It had to be you. I want love and forever.
And it kinda turns me on, so yes. And you see, that's where the sequel part of this ride comes into play. In late 2007, Magic Mountain announced it was closing X and transforming it into X2, complete with that aforementioned onboard audio, a new paint scheme that doesn't look as disgusting, new trains, fog effects, and some flamethrowers. That last one should be a standard on all roller coasters. The new and improved X2 opened to the public in 2008, and that's it! Yeah, not much of a history with this one. In fact, is it really that exciting of a sequel coaster? Like, yeah, it has a 2 in the name, that gives me a quick hit of dopamine, but other than that, it's just a solid refurbishment of an already pretty good roller coaster. Unlike the last 2 examples, it wasn't a straight up new coaster or there weren't any major changes to the track. At that rate, I can take anything that changes the name, the color scheme, and maybe the theming and call it an okay sequel as long as it rides the same. I want something more interesting. But what about a roller coaster manufacturer that's almost entirely based on creating sequels to coasters? I'm gonna give you 3 letters. RMC. Now I'm gonna give you 3 more letters. GOD. To a coaster enthusiast, those are the same thing. Rocky Mountain Construction, or RMC, is a manufacturer that has created some of the best coasters of the last 15 years or so. In a list of new roller coasters that open up each year, chances are an RMC is either at the top or near the top of every one. But what kinds of coasters do they make? Well, lately they've been building a few different kinds. They have a new family coaster called a Wild Moose in the works, their ground-up steel wood hybrid coasters have been getting some attention, and their single-rail Raptor coasters are insanely popular and inexpensive, making them great additions for just about any park in the world. But I'd argue their bread and butter is what they first started with, their wooden to steel hybrid roller coaster conversions. Essentially, what RMC does is take an old boring wooden coaster that's super rough and run its course, and repurpose its original structure by adding new steel track called iBox track, which is capable of bending in much more extreme ways than a normal wooden coaster, allowing it to even do things like go upside down. They've done this for tons of wooden roller coasters by now, but it all started back in 2011 with New Texas Giant at Six Flags Over Texas. Now, Texas Giant was, as some might say, bad, but I rode New Texas Giant back in 2020 like 8 times, and I must say that it is anything but that. Being the first RMC, they didn't go all out and put any super crazy elements or inversions on this, but it's still a wicked smooth ride with some insane airtime that I just couldn't get enough of. It's definitely one of my favorite coasters and the best one at Six Flags Over Texas by far, in my opinion. You know, since there's not too much more to discuss with New Texas Giant and I don't gotta release the hostages for another few minutes, we might as well quickly go through every other RMC conversion from wood to hybrid. Iron Rattler, a remake of Rattler at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. Medusa Steel Coaster, a remake of Medusa at Six Flags Mexico. Twisted Colossus, a remake of Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Wicked Cyclone, a remake of Cyclone at Six Flags New England. Storm Chaser, a remake of Twisted Twins at Kentucky Kingdom. Joker, a remake of Roar at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. Steel Vengeance, a remake of Mean Streak at Cedar Point. Twisted Cyclone, a remake of Georgia Cyclone at, you guessed it, Six Flags Over Georgia. Twisted Timbers, a remake of Hurler at King's Dominion. Untamed, a remake of of Robin Hood at Wallaby Holland, Hakuge, a remake of White Cyclone at Nagashima Spaland, Iron Gwazi, a remake of Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa, and finally Wildcat's Revenge, a remake of Wildcat at Hershey Park. Now, do all of these fall under the qualification of sequel coaster? I mean, they are a reimagined second version of a previous older ride, going as far as to use some or all of that ride's structure. Perhaps the more correct term for a ride like an RMC coaster is a reboot coaster instead of a sequel coaster, but the naming scheme of Wildcat's Revenge is perfect sequel material, and even the RMC coasters that add the word iron in front of the previous coaster's name, like Iron Gwazi or Iron Rattler, show that it's more than just a nice retracking, which is almost what I feel the term reboot coaster would work better for.
But I have no idea. These are all made up roller coaster terms anyways, so I could be completely incorrect with how I'm classifying all these, and it literally wouldn't matter. I just thought it would be fun to waste a few minutes talking about this, as I feel it's an interesting theme park concept that doesn't get discussed much. And obviously there are so many other sequel coasters to discuss, so much so that I could potentially make a sequel to this episode at some point.
After all, there is one very important sequel roller coaster that I left out, and it's also one of the few times Disney has created a sequel attraction of their own, so perhaps we'll discuss that one next time.
Or we'll just have to keep talking about Top Thrill 2 because it still won't be open by then.
God, every time!